The fog curled like smoke around the narrow mountain road, muffling the sound of Clara Morrow's boots as she stepped down from the old countryside bus. Her breath misted in the cold autumn air as she adjusted the strap of her leather satchel and looked around. The village of Blackmore lay tucked between two shadowed hills, its roofs dusted with red leaves and the faint gray of chimney smoke. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears like a warning.
Clara had come here to escape, to forget what happened. The city was filled with too many reminders, and her heart, though silent now, still beat with the ache of loss. This place, distant and hidden, had felt like a chance to breathe again. She approached the crooked wooden sign that read Ashcroft's Inn. The building it marked was tall, ivy-covered, and seemed to groan with memory. A place stuck in time. As she pushed open the heavy wooden door, a small brass bell above it gave a tired chime. Inside, the scent of aged wood and forgotten things filled the air. Oil lamps flickered on the walls, casting golden shadows that seemed to move when she wasn't looking. A voice rasped from behind the counter, "You must be Miss Morrow." Clara turned. An elderly woman stood there, tall and sharp-eyed, her long silver hair tied back. The right side of her face was twisted with a burned scar that disappeared beneath the collar of her black shawl. Her eyes, however, jet black and glassy, were alive with something unreadable. "Yes," Clara said softly. "I wrote about the room." "It's ready," the woman replied. "Top of the stairs, last door on the right. Mind the floorboards. They remember things." Clara blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" But Mrs. Ashcroft had already turned her back and disappeared into the hallway, her footsteps strangely silent for someone so tall. That night, Clara lay awake in her small attic room. The bed was warm, but she couldn't sleep. The wind whispered through the cracks in the windows, but it wasn't just wind. She heard faint creaks, a soft knock on the wall, the sound of a piano key pressed once, then silence. She sat up, holding her breath. Nothing. She got up and crossed to the window, pushing aside the lace curtains. Outside, beneath the willow tree across the street, stood a figure. Tall. Still. A man, wrapped in a long dark coat, his face hidden in shadow. She blinked. He was gone. The next morning, Clara wrapped her coat tightly around her and stepped out into the village. The air was crisp and filled with the scent of wet earth and wood smoke. She passed a baker, a post office, a silent chapel. Everywhere she went, people glanced at her, some politely, some fearfully. On the far edge of the village, hidden behind rusted iron gates, stood a mansion, massive, with arched windows and a roof blanketed in crimson ivy. It looked abandoned, yet not entirely empty. Clara stared at it, drawn by something she couldn't name. "No one lives there," said a voice behind her. She turned sharply. There he was, the man from last night. He stood only a few steps away. Tall. Sharp features. Short black hair. His eyes were a striking ice blue, and though his expression was calm, something about him felt haunted. Clara swallowed. Then, "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "A ghost, perhaps. Or just someone who doesn't like being remembered." She narrowed her eyes. "That's a strange thing to say." He shrugged. "Strange things tend to happen in Blackmore. And you think I've stepped into the middle of one?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." There was something in his voice, soft, certain, almost kind. Clara didn't move. Part of her wanted to walk away. The other part stayed. "What happened here?" she asked. The man looked up at the mansion. "That's a long story," he said. "But if you're brave enough to listen, I'll tell you." The journal's pages whispered secrets in Clara's hands, fragments of lives long lost, penned in ink faded with age. Names she didn't recognize danced alongside cryptic symbols and mentions of a girl who vanished from the village decades ago, Amara Wren. One name appeared repeatedly, Elias Thorne. That night, sleep came in fleeting waves. Shadows clung to the attic walls, and the wind howled through the rafters like a mournful lullaby. The journal lay on her nightstand, its pages fluttering though no breeze passed. The next morning, Clara set out with the journal under her coat. The sky was a dull gray, the kind that made everything feel forgotten. She returned to the old willow tree, where she had first seen the mysterious man. To her surprise, he was there again, leaning against the gnarled trunk, dressed in the same worn coat and scarf. His gaze met hers with a mix of curiosity and sorrow. "You came back," he said softly, his voice like rain on stone. Clara held out the journal. This belonged to someone. Someone named Amara. "Do you know her?" He hesitated. Everyone knew Amara. But no one speaks of her now. He introduced himself at last. "My name is Elias." The name struck her like a bell, Elias Thorne. The man in the journal. But he looked too young, too present to belong to a tale written decades ago. "How old are you, Elias?" she asked. A pause. A faint smile. "Old enough to remember, and young enough to regret." That night, back at the inn, Clara read the journal aloud by candlelight. As her voice echoed in the small attic room, she began to feel watched. The air thickened, as if the shadows themselves were listening. A name in the journal began to glow faintly under the candle's flicker. Ashcroft. Her heart pounded. Mrs. Ashcroft, the innkeeper, was mentioned again and again in the entries. Not as a caretaker, but as something darker. A guide. A keeper, a gatekeeper. The next day, Clara ventured deeper into the woods beyond the mansion. With Elias guiding her in silence, they came upon a clearing where the earth was unnaturally soft, covered in crimson moss. A stone archway stood in the center, wrapped in the same ivy that covered the mansion. "This is where it began," Elias whispered. "And where it ended." Clara knelt beside the archway. Symbols etched into the stones matched those in the journal. Suddenly, a voice echoed from behind them, "Mrs. Ashcroft." "You should not be here," she said calmly. But her eyes were no longer kind. They were empty, deep as wells. Elias stepped forward. "It's time." Mrs. Ashcroft raised a hand, and the wind surged, carrying whispers from the trees. The forest darkened. Clara clutched the journal. "What is this place?" Elias looked at her solemnly. "A boundary. Between memory and truth." A veil of red mist began to rise around them. The secrets of the village, the truth about Amara, Elias, and Mrs. Ashcroft. The truth about Amara, Elias, and Mrs. Ashcroft were no longer hidden. They were coming for her. The red mist coiled around Clara's feet like fingers from the earth, pulling at her courage. The air was thick, not just with fog, but with memory, aching, heavy memory. Beside her, Elias remained still, his face unreadable. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice trembling. He turned slowly. "Because I failed her once. I won't fail again." Suddenly, Mrs. Ashcroft stepped through the mist. Her figure barely human now. Her long black dress melted into the ground like smoke. Her voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Curiosity has a price, Clara." Clara opened the journal. The pages turned rapidly on their own until a single phrase burned into the parchment. "The truth must be seen, not told." Without warning, the stone archway behind them began to glow. Elias stepped forward and touched one of the carved symbols. The world shuddered. In a blink, Clara was no longer in the forest. She stood in a mirror world, where the village was twisted and warped. The inn was crumbling, windows boarded. The mansion burned in the distance. And in the middle of it all, Amara, the girl, stood alone, frozen in time. Her black hair flowed as if underwater. Her eyes locked with Clara's. "You saw me," Amara whispered. "Now remember me." Clara's vision cracked like glass. She was back in the clearing. The mist had cleared. Mrs. Ashcroft was gone. Elias knelt by the archway, his strength fading. "She was trapped here," he said. "Bound by memory. And silence. Clara placed the journal on the stones. Let her go. The moment the journal touched the arch, a wave of wind exploded outward. The ivy crumbled to ash. The crimson moss faded to green. Amara's laughter echoed faintly, light and free. Later, back in the village, everything felt different. The inn was warmer. The fog lighter. The weight of forgotten history had lifted. Mrs. Ashcroft was nowhere to be seen again. Some say she left. Others say she was never truly real. Clara found Elias one last time at the willow tree. She's free now, he said softly. So are you, Clara replied. He smiled. Not yet. But I'm closer. He turned to walk into the trees, and as he did, his form shimmered, fading into light. Clara stood alone beneath the crimson veil of the setting sun. The journal, now blank, rested in her bag. She had come for a story. She left with a secret.